Value yourself. In a remote mountain monastery, there lived a young monk named Daiki. Unlike his brothers, who walked tall and proud like bamboo stalks, Daiki often kept his head bowed, feeling inferior and useless, like a cracked bowl on the verge of breaking. Every morning at dawn, the monks would go down to the river to fill large water jars for the temple. Daiki did the same, but his jar, a worn clay pot with a crack along its side, always arrived at the top with less than half the water. Why don't they give me a new one? He wondered every day, disappointed in himself. I can't even do this right. The others never judged him, but Daiki was harsh on himself, as if carrying that crack was a shame. One morning, on his way back from the river, Master Ryokan was waiting for him by the stone path. In a calm voice, he said, "Tomorrow, when you carry the water again, I want you to pay close attention to the path you take." Daiki nodded, not fully understanding. What could the same old path possibly teach him? But the next day he obeyed. As Daiki left the river, he paid close attention to the path as the master had asked. On one side, the ground was dry and dusty, but on the other side, where his jar dripped with every step, wildflowers bloomed in vivid colors. Lilies, daisies, and small lotuses sparkling with the morning dew. Daiki stopped, surprised. He had never noticed this before. Had they always been there? Or was this the first time he truly saw them? When he reached the temple, he found Master Ryokan again, sitting under the old plum tree. "Master," Daiki began, still holding his jar. "Today, I saw flowers along the path, right where water dripped from my jar. I hadn't noticed them before." Ryokan smiled. "I planted them months ago," he replied gently. "I knew your jar was cracked, and I also knew that if you accepted it and kept walking, something beautiful would grow from it." Daiki fell silent. He gently touched the warm clay of the jar in his hands, as if seeing it for the first time. That crack he had despised so much had watered a garden without him even knowing. "So, it wasn't a mistake to use this jar?" he asked, his voice trembling. Ryokan shook his head kindly. "Not everything has to be perfect to have value. Sometimes, it's the crack itself that makes something special. You thought you were useless, but every flower along that path is the result of your journey, your persistence, of what you once believed was worthless." Daiki felt something inside him loosen, as if, for the first time in a long while, he could breathe without carrying a stone on his chest. "Value yourself, Daiki," the master said, "because even without knowing it, you have been sowing beauty into this world." That night, Daiki couldn't sleep. From his futon by the window, he watched the full moon filter through the cherry blossoms and thought about the flowers along the path. He thought about how many times he had silently cried for feeling less, for not being like the others, for not meeting his own expectations. But now he understood something he had never considered before. He didn't need to be like the other monks, nor carry a perfect jar to have worth. Maybe, he thought, the crack in his soul had been watering something all along, without him even knowing. The next day, returning from the river, Daiki stopped by the blooming path. He knelt down and ran his hand through the petals. They were real, alive, born from his flaw. "Thank you," he whispered, not to Ryokan, not to anyone else, but to himself. For the first time, he didn't wish to be different. That morning, as the sun peeked over the mountains, Ryokan led Daiki to a hidden pond nestled among pine trees. The water was so clear that the entire sky was reflected in it. "Look at yourself," the master said, "but not with eyes that judge. Look with eyes that understand." Daiki leaned over the pond. Out of habit, he searched for imperfections, in his face, his posture, his expression. But this time, he remembered the flowers. He remembered the path. He remembered the master's words. And instead of seeing an incomplete face, he saw someone who had kept walking despite doubts. Someone who, without knowing it, had been useful, had beautified the world, simply by being who he was. The world already has enough broken mirrors that reflect false images, Ryokan said softly. Learn to look at yourself as you would a cherry blossom, without asking it to be anything else, without demanding it bloom out of season. Daiki closed his eyes. The pond was still there, the reflection too, but inside him something had changed. In the days that followed, Daiki continued going down to the river with the same cracked jar. But he no longer hid it beneath his robes, nor did he try to seal the crack with clay. He left it visible, like someone who carries a scar with honor, not shame. Other monks began to notice something different about him. His steps were steadier, his voice calmer, not because he felt superior, but because he no longer felt less. One day, one of the younger novices approached him and asked, "Brother Daiki, how do you walk with such peace?" Daiki smiled. "I've learned that it's not about fixing yourself to fit in, but about discovering how to bloom with who you already are." The young novice nodded, not fully understanding, but touched by the gentleness of his words. In silence, Daiki realized that valuing yourself isn't an act of ego. It's an act of gratitude. Gratitude for having come this far, with all your cracks, stumbles, and silences. One evening, as the temple was wrapped in the song of crickets, Daiki sat beneath the plum tree where Ryokan often meditated. In his hands, he held a simple yet beautiful tea bowl, with a thin golden line where it had once been broken. Ryokan approached and sat silently beside him. Daiki carefully lifted the bowl and said, "This bowl was repaired with gold, following the tradition of kintsugi. I used to think hiding the cracks was the only way to keep its beauty. Now I know that what's been broken and healed can be even more precious." The master nodded slowly. That's the human heart. It's not about avoiding harm, but learning to embrace what's been lived. Your cracks don't diminish your worth. They reveal it. Daiki took a sip of tea. For the first time, his heart felt full. Not because he had changed, but because he had accepted who he had always been. Years passed, and Daiki became a wise and calm master, sought by those who felt broken, lost, or not enough. But he never preached with grand speeches. He simply walked alongside them, sometimes in silence, sometimes sharing tea, or pointing out the flowers growing at the edges of the path. Many asked what his main teaching was, his secret. He would smile and say, "I didn't come to teach you to be someone else, only to remind you of who you already are." Every day, Daiki continued going down to the river with his old cracked jar, and the path, nourished by his steady steps, kept blooming, because deep within his soul, he had understood that valuing yourself isn't vanity or pride. It's a quiet act of love, like a cracked jar that, without knowing it, feeds the earth with every step. And so, without fanfare, he returned home, to himself, to the place that had always been waiting for him.